first of all, I feel like it's been a long time, but it hasn't been a really long time. I want people to know, because it seems like there's a myriad of things that you do. What exactly is it that Doc Montgomery does?
I do a lot of things. Like you said, right now I'm a public defender for the Caddo Parish Public Defender's Office in the juvenile section. I don't like calling them juveniles, I like calling them children, because that's what they are. So I keep 10 to 17-year-olds, try to do my best to keep them out of jail or offer probation, but just defending their rights and making sure that their constitutional rights are protected. In addition to that, I also was teaching at Southern University, teaching political science and economics as well. I had a great time doing that. It's been a year teaching at the university level, so it's been fun.
Wow.
But prior to that, I was in law school, finished up my MBA. Prior to that, I was an engineer for the Department of Defense, and yeah, started college at 10. Started college at 10.
What?
Yeah, started taking college classes at 10. Started full-time at 14. Graduated at 19 with my bachelor's in mechanical engineering. And so then started moving forward, yeah.
Prodigy over here, we got a child prodigy. So when it talks about, you have so much knowledge when it comes to the legal system, the justice system, all the kind of behind the scenes interworkings. Why do you think it's so important that people vote?
Absolutely. Well, first off, when we think about voting, we have to look at what we don't understand, we don't trust, or it makes us angry. And if we don't trust something or something that makes us angry, then we disengage from it. And voting is one of those things that we don't understand why we're voting. Most people don't understand how voting changes the outcomes in their life.
How does it? Because people just be like, it's not going to make no difference whether I cast my vote anyway. I might as well not. Why is that harmful?
It's harmful because we don't realize how our system works. We've been miseducated and misinformed about how our actual system works. So when people tell you that, oh, well, people are going to do whatever they want to do and it's the system and blah, 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 they're right in a sense, but you're allowing the system to do those things. And the system isn't just a system, it's people doing things. So when we're able to tie people to positions to the actual power, that helps us understand a little bit better of how voting helps us, but the true why is in understanding that when you vote for the mayor decides who the police chief is going to be. The police chief is in charge of hiring the officers that end up either liking people that look like you or don't like people that look like you, that share the same values that you do or don't. So if you believe in having a police officer or police chief that likes beating up on black people, then when you don't vote for a mayor that cares about those kinds of things, well, you're allowing yourself to have him put in place the mayor, not the mayor, but the police chief, who then is going to put in officers that feel the same way that he does. When you have officers that feel the same way that he does, then we see the outcomes that we have. So it's very easy for us to say, like, voting doesn't matter, but we don't realize how voting for one particular person has this ripple effect on our lives. We can vote on our judges. We talk about a school to prison pipeline, but long before you're ever in jail, you see a judge. Before you ever see a judge, it's the district attorney that's charging you. Before the district attorney charges you, it's the police officers that are charging you. So you see how we go from just a simple vote or voting for a judge, voting for a district attorney, how it has these ripple effects in our lives. So the problem is we haven't made the connection between voting and measurable outcomes in our individual lives.
Dang, that's crazy. And kind of your own passions and pursuit, why was it important for you to try to be on the ground and kind of do that grassroots aspect of really just educating people on politics? Why was it important for you? Just as a man, as a thinker, as a professor, as a student, as a lawyer, so many different titles.
Long before I was ever any of those things, I was a black man. And my own experience is what informed it. In fact, I didn't want to have anything to do with social justice. I didn't want to have anything to do with none of this work.
What?
Absolutely nothing.
So how'd you get into it?
I got my own self into some trouble, and I reached out to the NAACP. Most people call it the NAACP, but my grandfather, John R. Hatcher III, would have a fit if I called it the NAACP. It's the NAACP. Got involved with my chapter in Ventura County, and they helped me through the legal troubles that I was dealing with. And I realized how powerful the law was, and he put the bug in my ear about going to law school. Well, before I applied to law school, I was chair of legal redress for my chapter. And that's where I really got to see what it looks like on the ground floor at the grassroots level of organizing and keeping people out of jail. A lot of times the NAACP gets a bad rap because people ask, well, what does the NAACP do? Well, my chapter, 2 o'clock in the morning, we're getting phone calls about the police at people's doors, and I'm suiting up to go handle that situation. That's the kind of lineage that I come from, and that's the kind of background that I have that has really informed me on why it's important for us to be involved at every level.
The question that I've been asked is, in 6 words, define freedom. Freedom is knowing and acting in universal truth.
So what did you think that you were going to do before you got into legal trouble?
I was supposed to go to the Air Force.
For real? Why the
become
Air
a fighter
Force?
pilot. I want to be a fighter pilot.
Why?
Guns, cars, and airplanes was my passions. Guns, cars, and airplanes. I've been crazy about them since I was a little kid.
So how did you deviate from that, and why? And how is it for you, especially because people could be looking at you crazy, like, he all black power now, and he think he down with the people, and why can't he just, just make a regular career and make money that way?
Well, people are going to have whatever they think that they should say, right? But oftentimes people don't know history, right? Mandela was a lawyer, right?
Barack Obama?
Castro was a lawyer.
Ah.
Che Guevara was a doctor. Barack Obama, lawyer. I define what I'm supposed to be doing with my life, right? I live according to my own purpose. I live according to the purpose that God has given me. And I believe that as I make my moves and knock on the right doors, that those doors will be open to me, and that the doors that aren't supposed to be open to me will be closed. I never expected to be involved in this work as heavily as I am, and it was by surprise. It was truly by surprise. I knew that this is thankless work, that it's hard work, that it's emotionally taxing work, and that's the reason why I didn't want to be involved at all, because I know the sacrifices that are required. I know the business that I've chosen, and whatever comes with that business, that's the rules to the game.
So why do it if you know that it's going to bring you hardship, or is maybe a little bit more difficult than something that would be easier, such as like, a business career, a corporate career, a plane flying career? What's your why?
My why? I'm tired of seeing my people in the position that they're in and saying that there's only one way to make it happen. I believe that there's another way of making it happen. And the only way that you can do it is by showing it, leading by example. Everybody else wants liberation and freedom, but who's willing to put in the work and the time and the dues to see that happen?
And what does that dues and time and work look like for you?
Sacrifice. It's sacrifice of what people think that I should be doing. I'm looking at here and I'm seeing legislators. I'm seeing people who have the power to decide what our laws are. However, where is the background and where is your experience and education that gives you the authority to do something as unconstitutional as provide this ban? We want to talk about morality, but morality has nothing to do with constitutionality. There were things that were constitutional. It was constitutional to deprive black men of their rights. Was that moral? Was that right? I stand here because I look and I see legislators who have power and the people who don't recognize how their power affects the people. What does that sacrifice look like for me? My family would love nothing more than for me to be working some corporate job right now, right? Because there's prestige in that. There's not prestige in being a quote-unquote freedom fighter or liberator or revolutionary. There's no prestige in that. It's a hard cost to pay. And when we think of revolutionaries, we often think of guns and fighting, right? but revolution happens on all levels, on an academic level, on an economic level, on a political level. I mean, on a physical level, that's what we often think of. But we can't be afraid of doing the hard things, the politically unpopular things, but are they right? Yes. Do we have just cause? Yes, we do. And if everyone goes to start talking about, hey, well, we should do this, I ask, where's your boots at? Are you on the front line? Are you willing to put in that work? Whatever front line that you're on, are you willing to put in that work? What is your goal? What's the end all for it? If you're doing it just for yourself, then once again, you can't beat racism as an individual, you only beat it as a team.
That's good.
Everybody's got a role, even if it's getting rolled over.
And I love how the fact that you're talking about just that groundwork that you do, really helping out community and really helping out people. And I know you have a daughter, you work with kids. We're talking about kind of building up the Black community and just building up community in general. Why do you think it's important people are building wealth as opposed to just building riches or getting rich right now?
It's short-term thinking, and we have to be real long-term thinking in terms of solutions. Yes, racism is an issue, but racism was a team sport. And the only way that you beat racism, you beat oppression, is not through individualism, it's by operating as a team. So when we think of wealth, what we're saying is that I want something to be able to pass on to my children. I want something to be able to pass on to my family. I want them to not only pass it on to them, but I want them to grow it. So the focus has to always be on growing wealth. Yes, you can be rich, but you're not wealthy. Meaning I can have a Mercedes-Benz, but I don't have the house to put it in, right? I don't have the property that's allowing me to fund that luxury. So when we think of wealth, when we think of riches, it's all about how you really define wealth. The older you get, you more hear about older people saying, oh, thank God for your health. That's the true wealth, right? That's the true wealth. That's the one thing that we would like to have more of, but we're really not too in control of that. So maintaining our health as our number one wealth, and the relationships that we have with people around us, that's true wealth, right? You can't bring any of it with you. As a matter of fact, you didn't come into this world with anything as well. So really identifying what wealth is, and if we allow somebody else to define what wealth is for us, we're in trouble, always behind the 8 ball, because we're chasing somebody else's definition. How many times have you changed your mind?
Too many to count.
Exactly,
Too many.
exactly. So here it is, if you are the one that's defining what wealth means to you, then you are a wealthy person. I am an extremely wealthy person. I have my health, I have my right mind, I have my family. I may not have as much money as I want to, but I mean, I'm a creator. That'll come as well.
I love that, and I think that's so important, because when we're talking about the way that people define the things that are important to them, it's different from so many other people. But I also think when we're talking about getting wealthy and having that generational wealth, we have to take a look at history. And kind of, could you explain or maybe elaborate a little bit more on government and its role in wealth in terms of Black people, African Americans, just the history behind it?
Absolutely. The government's definitely had an impact and a role in making people wealthy and making people poor. And the fact is that for so long we were kept out of the government. And to an extent, it's institutionalized that we're kept out. And the fact that if somebody's got a 300-year head start on you, you're going to be behind.
And break that down a little bit for some people who aren't aware of the 300-year start. Like,
absolutely.
what does that mean? What does that look like?
We came here and we were legally defined as property, meaning that me, you, and your iPhone were considered in the same kind of category. Had their own, if they could put barcodes on us, they would have, right? They put brands on us. So our ancestors. So what we would call our ancestors, I would say our enslaved ancestors, our enslaved African ancestors, they were treated as property. They were removed, their humanity was removed by law. They had no rights that needed to be respected by anyone. So the same way that you could dispose of your iPhone or dispose of a piece of trash, you could dispose of a human life. So when we were considered what was actually wealth, we were the wealth. Physical human bodies were considered wealth. The more that you had under your control, the wealthier you were, because we produced. We were the producers of the land. We were the producers of some of the finished products. We produced that. So the more you had of us, the more wealthy you were. Well, government had a role in defining this, saying if you were black, you could not own property. You were property. You had no rights. But if you were white, then you had the ability of owning property. You had the ability of owning people that looked like us, owning our ancestors. So when we think of the government's role in creating wealth or taking wealth away, that's actually what the Civil War was about. It wasn't so much about the emancipation of the slaves. It was about economic control of black folks.
Yeah.
Who was going to have the control of all the resources that these black people produced and the skilled labor? Who was going to have control over that? Was it going to be the North or was it going to be the South? Because if it would remain the South, well, guess where the North got all their finished products from? The South. So who was going to have control over that skilled labor? If I can't go after the resources directly, I'm going to go after the labor. We were that labor.
So kind of, I know we talked about the history of slavery. So sort of walk us through a little bit, because it's not as simple as slavery ended years ago. You guys just needed to get it together. There's a lot of disadvantages that have been put in place historically.
That's where government comes in, right? 1868 is when the Civil War ended. Fast forward just about 100 years, 1968, we have the Civil Rights Movement. So you went from being property or 3/5 human to finally, when the Voting Rights Act comes in 1965, to finally now being able to vote. So there's a myriad of rights that you were not able to exercise during that 100-year period. If you can't vote, how can you be part of the government? How can you have a say in what your government does? So from that 100-year period, we see how the laws were utilized, not to take away justice from us, but the way that we utilize law is to control resources. So if I still see you as a resource, I'm going to do everything in my power to maintain that control over you. If I give you now say, I'm saying you have the ability of controlling your own resources. That's what voting allows us to do, is have more control over our resources. Because guess what the government takes from you every month, or every time that you swipe your card, or every time that you buy something? Taxes. Mm-hmm. Taxes. Now you have a say in where those tax dollars go if you're able to vote. So now you see during that time from 1868 to 1968, we also had Greenwood, Oklahoma. We had Black Wall Street, but the one in Greenwood wasn't the only Black Wall Street. We were living in segregated neighborhoods, which forced the doctor, the lawyer, the trash man, the teacher, the bus driver. All of us lived in the same neighborhood. So we had our own systems in place and economic systems in place that allowed us to thrive. Then when we have integration in the 60s, now what happens is you take away you take away the thread that kept us as a close-knit community. So when we were segregated, we had to stick together. When integration became the law, we thought that it was dealing with the hearts of white folks living in America. But really, it was about the resources. And if you got a 10-pound cake, you don't want to share it with nobody else if you're greedy, right? But it's all about power and control. So from that 100-year period, there was a level of power and control. And now moving from the Civil Rights Movement to where we are now, is that's been chipping away at that power and control. We're gaining more power and control. However, we still live at a disadvantage. The difference between when we had our own segregated communities and how powerful we were is that now we don't have the mindset that they had back in the early 30s and the 40s when it was segregated. We weren't thinking about making sure that we stayed independent, that we stayed powerful, that we focused on entrepreneurship and in business ownership and becoming good business people. We lost all of that focus after integration. And now we're making that transition back to that because we don't have any friends. All we have is ourselves. Once again, the only way that we beat it is as a team sport. Racism is a team sport. Our liberation, our freedom has to be a team sport as well.
I know we talked about a lot, and
yes.
I know we covered a lot of issues. One last question. With your legacy, if you could tell me maybe in one sentence, who is Toi Montgomery, and what legacy is it that you want to leave? what do you want your actions to let people know about you as a man?
Oh, you just gonna hit with a heavy hitter like that? Just
They call it Toy Talks for a reason.
I see.
You know,
I see.
it's
Living up to
Toy
your name.
Monet
Living
Creel
up to
work
your
here.
name. When you see something wrong, put it on the line. Put it on the line to make it right. Be a disruptor. That's what it requires. Be a disruptor. My legacy is going to be what I've poured into other people and how I've inspired others. That's going to be my legacy. My grandfather told me, he said, I'll live on forever. And I never understood what he meant by that. And I'm starting to understand what he meant by that. What it was is that the things that he's taught me, I'll be teaching someone else, right? So now here it is the memory of my grandfather will continue to live on through the things that he's poured into me and what I've poured into other people. And I want to continue to pour into other people. That's what I want my legacy to be.